UFC London was last week. UFC Seattle this week. UFC Seattle Tuesday fight live stream, whatever the fuck you guys want to call it. I don't even know what I'm calling it. I'm just calling it Tuesday live stream, I guess is the is the name that I'm going with. But a ton to talk about for this week, whether it is the fallout of UFC London. Obviously, we had a highly controversial main event decision. We also had some mediocre performances. Some people calling for Michael Venom Page to be cut. We also got UFC Seattle coming up this weekend. We can talk about that. Some of the lines for that card. Some of the predictions. Obviously, I put up my full card predictions earlier this week, aka yesterday. If you haven't had the chance to check that out, make sure you guys do. And then we also got the Netflix MMA card. I think they're going to go be calling it MVP MMA. I could be wrong, but I believe it's MVP MMA. And they announced their full card today. Seeing a lot of mixed reactions about that as well. Some people being like, hey, it's a sick fucking card. It checks all the boxes. You know, it gets the casuals hooked because of the name value that's attached to it, whether it's old names or not. It also has some high-level names of guys that are currently in their prime that hardcore fans would know. You know, Saladin Parnassi, obviously one of those guys coming over from Cage Warriors. Mohamed Mokaev takes on Adriano Moraes, I believe it is. That's the guy that had a few of those wars against Demetrius Johnson for ONE FC. We saw a few people teasing Mokaev being on the Netflix MMA card. And I saw a lot of people tweet on like, there's not many good free agents right now that would make you be like, okay, that's a good fight for Mokaev. That's a not stylistically speaking, but at least, a good name value or at least a B-side for him for his fight. And a lot of people are speculating that it would have been Demetrius Johnson himself. You know, if anybody was going to be able to put together enough money for Demetrius Johnson to make his comeback, it would be somebody like Netflix. But it ended up being, somebody connected to Demetrius Johnson in the form of Adriano Moraes, who had obviously a lot of fights with DJ. I think they had one or two fights. So solid fight there for, what there is. I'm going to completely ignore what that comment says. Jeez. Comment section coming with straight fire right away. But yeah, other good fights. Junior Dos Santos on the card. Why are we putting him in there with fucking Robelis to Spain? Obviously, we know JDS could grapple if he needs to, but obviously in his prime, he was more of a striker. And I think that's kind of the skill set, or at least the combat sports he ended up sticking with after being released from the UFC, was going out there and boxing. I could be wrong whether he went to bare knuckle boxing, but I know he did some striking matches afterwards. You know what? Let's start off with that card. Let's start off with the Netflix card. All right, so right off the top, we got. Well, we already talked ad nauseum about Diaz, Perry, Rousey, Carano, and Ngannou Lewis. I think we pretty much talked that to the ground over the last couple of weeks. Let me just try to pull up the card here as well, so we can both see it. I think that should be good. Nope, not like that. There we go. Let's try to make this a little bit bigger. All right. So, like I said, we talked about the top three fights ad nauseum. Don't really need to talk too much more about that one. So let's go down the list here. Saladin Parnasse going up against Kenneth Cross. Parnasse, obviously a high-level KSW prospect, 22-2 record. I believe his only loss was when he was trying to go up a division. I think he tried becoming like a triple champ or something like that. Didn't really work out for him. Similar to what we saw with like Adesanya trying to go up to 205. That didn't really work out for him, but still very high level prospect. KSW is paying him a bunch of money. Now, I don't know if they went out there and loaned him, to Netflix here for this opportunity, or if he's truly left KSW, because I swear he was a free agent within the last year or so, and from all indications, he was being re-signed by KSW. So the fact that he's here now with Netflix, again, I don't know if it's like a co-promotion type of thing, or if he's going to be having KSW all over his shorts while he goes for this matchup, but good for him to get on this type of platform to really spread his name. He goes up against Kenneth Cross, who I believe is a former Contender Series vet. Didn't really have much success there. So it's a mediocre, Kenneth Cross is a guy that could be like a LFA champion type fighter, maybe a fringe UFC kind of guy. So I guess that's not a horrible matchup for Parnasse. So that should be interesting to see how that one goes down. I will say this before I continue on. I will do a full card breakdown for this, obviously the week of the fight. I'm expecting there to be a few changes here and there, maybe some injuries or something like that. I'm sure a lot of these guys would fight through the injuries considering what kind of opportunity this is. But I will obviously break down this card in its entirety and give you guys a betting breakdown of it when the time comes. Then we got JDS against Robelis Despain. Obviously, we talked about that one. I don't expect Dos Santos to really strike with him. I think we'll see him try to take this to the ground. I think he's strong enough. We know that Despain is pretty much a fish out of water off his back. So that's seemingly going to be something that's quite obvious, unless he chooses to strike, and then Despain will probably just knock him out cleanly, which is going to be very unfortunate. Then we got Mohamed Mokaev versus Adriano Moraes. Fun fight there. Moraes obviously a solid 1FC fighter. He has very solid striking, good all-around game, and to go up against a guy like Mokaev, fun fight. It's good for the hardcores. It's a fun fight to see where both those guys are at. Then we got Lorenz Larkin versus Jason Jackson. Larkin, obviously former UFC and Bellator fighter, and PFL as well, I think, going up against Jason Jackson. Jackson, former Bellator champion. Interesting clash there. Obviously, you got the Muay Thai of Larkin. You got the wrestling and the top control of Jackson. So it could either play out exciting, or Jackson just goes out there and Russell fucks Larkin, which is getting harder to do, right? Larkin went up against, I remember, Mohamed Burkamov, and he was able to halt most of that grappling and then knocked him out with one of the nastiest elbows we've ever seen. Maybe he can still bring that here, but I feel like he's getting too much up there in age, and Jackson might be able to out-grapple him. Then we got Namo Fazil going up against Jake Babian. I've heard of Fazil. I haven't heard all that much about Babian, but from what I'm seeing, apparently he's a hot prospect on the regional scene. So maybe that's one for the real hardcores, and obviously I'll start to uncover more about these guys as I start studying them. Then we got David McGoyan versus Albert Morales. McGoyan had that crazy war against Tommy McMillan on the Contender Series this past season. He's a high-level prospect. He was one that I was hoping would eventually get to the UFC. And obviously just that one loss to Tommy McMillan. He has had a win since that matchup, and now he's going up against former UFC fighter Albert Morales. Morales, you can even see from the picture there, the guy looks weathered, right? The guy doesn't really look like, he's at a point where he can be competing with a high-level prospect like McGoyan. So I'm assuming we're going to see heavy chalk on the McGoyan side of things, but McGoyan is a very fun prospect that will surely bring the entertainment. Then we got Alex Pereira's sister, Alini Pereira. She takes on Canadian Jade Mason Wong. I've heard about Mason Wong a few times. She's, I believe, fought for Samurai MMA. I believe she's also done bare knuckle. I could be off on that. But interesting matchup there. Pereira obviously hasn't had as much MMA success as her brother has. So, she tried going through the LFA route. LFA hasn't really worked out for her all that well. She's been losing against some no-names and stuff, so that's been very tough for her. But she still has enough of a name to get an opportunity like this. And I'm sure Alex Pereira will probably be at the card too, so that definitely helps Netflix in terms of maybe promotion in a certain way. I'm not sure, but we'll see how that goes. And then, obviously, Mr. 8-9 Chris Avila gets an opportunity to fight on this card. If you guys remember, Chris Avila, I believe, was on the UFC roster as well, only because of Nate Diaz. I don't think his UFC run was all that long. Not a great fighter, but he has such a close connection with Nate Diaz that it seems like whenever Diaz fights, he gets to bring Chris Avila along with him. So they don't really have an opponent for him as of yet, but I'm sure they'll find some sort of scrub for him for Avila to fight, and Avila might even lose that. So solid card. Like I said, decent card all around. Again, you got the top 3 fights there to attract the crowd, and then you got the rest of it to try to cater to the rest of the MMA fans out there, or the hardcore MMA fans. And I think it's fine. I really think it's fine. For anybody that's like staking their flag on one side or the other here, it'd be like, oh, this is a horrible card, mainly because of like the aging fighters are on this card, or as some guys saying, oh, this is an amazing card. It's a good card for a non-UFC promotion, especially with the backing of a platform like Netflix. This is a solid first offering. This is a good enough first offering. You got, again, you're checking all the boxes here. So I really don't mind it myself. I think it's fine all around. I don't think that, we'll really figure out what Netflix is in this for. Are they trying to just do one-offs? Are they trying to build something like that? Are they trying to eventually incorporate champions? Who knows? I'm thinking it's going to be the more of the first thing. I think it's going to be one-offs. I think they're going to try to put the biggest fights they can possibly get on. I think they're going to try to pull some guys from the UFC so they can start making more cards. But I don't think they're like, we're hearing they're getting crazy numbers, some of these fighters, right? Like $10, $15 million. That's a losing strategy in mixed martial arts. Like, I don't see, a lot of signups coming to Netflix because of this card. I think whoever has Netflix already is going to be like, hey, I know Ronda Rousey. I know Gina Carano, the girl from The Mandalorian. I'll watch this because I have Netflix. But it's not going to instill more subscribers, in my opinion. So, again, this might just be like a boxing thing. This might just be like, we got these names now. We can put them together. We're going to put on this card. It's the second and third fights. I said this on my last live stream as well. It's going to be the second, third, fourth Netflix MMA event to really see what their trajectory is and if it's something that they can maintain. I don't think they will, but we'll see. All right, let's see what the chat is saying here. Beside my guy Root Vegetable at the top here, who just probably the most unhinged comment that I've ever fucking seen. So I'll stay away from that. Matthew in the chat, as always, appreciate you stopping by, my guy. He said, I saw a rumor Masvidal was in talks to participate. Yeah, I saw that as well. Apparently, he said he was getting like $10 or $50 million as well to fight for Netflix, but apparently the UFC has something for him. I can't imagine what the UFC has for Jorge Masvidal. Who wants to see Jorge Masvidal fight in 2026, right? What the fuck has Jorge Masvidal been up to? Not been training, at least from what I've been able to see. In terms of competition. So his last UFC fight was that absolute snooze fest against Gilbert Burns back in April 2023, UFC 287. It was the night that Pereira... Was it the night Pereira knocked out Adesanya, or was it the other way around? No, it was the night where Adesanya got his revenge on Pereira. That's how long it's been. And now Adesanya on a slump right now, headlining a fight night. Just putting things into context and how quickly things move. And then since then, we saw Diaz Masvidal too, but in boxing, I completely missed that fight. I didn't even I remember it was hyped a little bit. I believe there was a lot of issues on it in terms of those guys getting paid. I don't even know if they ended up getting paid from Fanmio, I think it was. But that fight was July of 2024. So, nearly 2 years since then. Why in the world do we want to see Jorge Masvidal fight? I can only imagine what the UFC has plans for him, or if Masvidal is just talking shit right now. So yeah, that's the other thing. I'm assuming they would have tried to do Masvidal Diaz 3 as a MMA fight for that Netflix card. Maybe that's what he got offered. But yeah, nobody wants to see Masvidal fight anymore. If Austin Lane can do it, then JDS should be able to. You're right. If Austin Lane could go out there and grapple fuck Robelis Despain, he could do it. The issue is, will he want to do it, right? We know he's a striker. Austin Lane was more so of just a athletic mixed martial artist. But Junior Dos Santos, we don't know him to go out there and actually grapple these guys. Maybe at this stage in his career, maybe he knows I can just easily take this guy down, but that's not a fight I would bet on one side or the other, honestly. Because you're just assuming what JDS is going to do, which we don't know if he's actually going to do. I think when you said he looks like he's getting a paycheck, I think that's Albert Morales that you were talking about. For a Jake Paul event, this looks solid on paper. Yeah, for sure. And one thing that a lot of people overlook, the guy that Jake Paul works with for MVP, for Most Valuable Promotions, is a former UFC, I think, accountant or somebody that was higher up in the UFC years and years ago. Nikisa is his first name. He's a guy that you always see with Jake Paul at these events. So he kind of knows the MMA game a little bit. We'll see if he can actually put it to use with what Netflix is allowing them to do. But yeah, until they can pull away guys from the UFC that are actually getting viewership right now, I think it's still going to be a tough ask for Netflix to take over the UFC. I feel like another thing here for Netflix is that they're maybe trying to get back at the UFC for going with Paramount instead of actually going with Netflix. Obviously, it's going to be, I'm sure Netflix was not willing to pay the UFC $7.7 billion for the next 7 years. So I think it was an easy call for the UFC to be like, all right, we'll go with Paramount. I'm sure there's a lot of politics behind it as well, but I don't want to get too much into that or get into the weeds about that. So I'm sure this is Netflix's clapback and be like, hey, we can do what you do. But the thing is, we've seen so many promotions in the past try to do that. Bellator, PFL, Strikeforce, Pride to a certain extent, even though that was on the other side of the world. Nobody has managed to be as successful as the UFC. And I think a lot of that has to do with how they manage the finances. That's one thing that the UFC continues to eat on a yearly basis is like, hey, fighters should be getting paid more. Fighters should be getting paid more. Why aren't fighters getting paid more? And I think the method they took to get to where they're at right now was because they were so stingy with the money that they had, right? They're paying whatever their executives, they're paying operational costs as well, right? Flying to all these cities, set up, all that, tear down, all that stuff, licenses, lobbying in certain states as well to try to get the sport legalized. Obviously, we're way past that at this point in time, but on the come up, I remember they couldn't do MMA events in Ontario, Canada, until about 2009 or 2010, I think it was. 2011 was the first UFC event, so I think it was 2010 they ended up getting it passed. So even New York, right? New York was after Ontario, Canada. I want to say that was like 12, 13, maybe even 14. So it really comes down to, like, I'm not, I guess it's kind of sounding like I'm defending the UFC not paying the fighters. That's not what I'm trying to say here. I'm sure they could definitely give the fighters more. They could definitely, get closer to a 50-50 share. They keep trying to say like, hey, we build UFC PIs for these guys, right? We do fighter insurance to a certain number. I think it's like $50K they give a fighter or something like that if they need surgery or something like that. Right? I've heard of many stories where fighters go into fights injured, knowing they'll probably lose, whether it's their debut or whatever fight it is for them, just so they can get that first fight and then apply for the UFC to cover surgery or recovery for them. So, yeah, big question mark in terms of what Netflix is going to be able to do. And I'm looking forward to it. I got Netflix, and I believe it's the same night as a UFC event as well. Let me quickly pull that up. I know there's a UFC event the same night. I don't think it's a big UFC event though. I think it's like an Apex card. What was it? May 16th? Yeah, May 16th. So far, for that card, it is an Apex card. Excuse me. We got Arnold Allen headlining against Melquizael Costa. High stakes featherweight matchup there. Then we got Ketlin Vieira going up against Jacqueline Cavalcanti. We got Modestas Bukauskas going up against Rodolfo Vieira. Elise Argeline going up against Poliana Viena. Daniel Barez going up against Luis Gurul, who I'm very happy Gurul is getting another opportunity. This is a fight he should win. I'm just going to say that. And then the last one that was announced so far is Andre Petrosyan against Cody Brundage, who is still somehow getting UFC opportunities. He made it sound like he's fighting in the near future. That means Masvidal Diaz 3 is off the table. Interesting. Again, what name? Yeah, I have no idea what matchup would be compelling Masvidal to return. I don't think Dana is dying to see a Covington rematch or can market a fight against Conor. I can't think of anyone else. Actually, you just said it, Matthew. You just said it. Conor Masvidal right now makes sense. I know we're trying to push for, or the big fight they were trying to push for was Conor versus Michael Chandler. We know that's not happening anymore. Or at least we don't think it's happening anymore. But to do Conor versus Masvidal is not a bad fight. It can take place at 170 pounds, right? Masvidal would primarily fight at 170. Conor, no way is cutting back down to 155, let alone 145. So he's going to fight at 170. Conor's been out of action since 2021. Masvidal has been out of action, like I said, since 2024 for boxing, 2023 for MMA. Both guys at similar stages of their career where they might as well just retire. They're not nearly what they used to be at their peak. And maybe this is a fight for Conor where he's like, I could probably still win this. It's not a fight where we're like he's going up against somebody that's been super active, one of the killers of the division or something like that. There was rumblings that it would be Conor versus Praches, but Praches or Conor would be idiotic to take that fight, considering how active Praches has been as of late, whereas Conor's just been sitting on the sidelines. So I could potentially see McGregor versus Masvidal. They're just squeezing the last little bit from Conor and Masvidal in terms of just going through with their hype and any type of pull they still have with the mainstream crowd. I was just looking up the ages. So rumors are Conor will be returning to fight on International Fight Week. That's July 11th. He'll be 3 days short of his 38th birthday. What's Masvidal? Masvidal is probably around that age too, right? Well, Masvidal is 40-1. He turned 41 back in November. That's a fight where I feel like Conor would be like, I'm down to take this fight. And it's one where fans, for the most part, will be like, all right, we'll take it. Because what other fights are there? I really think the biggest fight they could have made with Conor is Diaz-Conor 3. With Diaz obviously being with Netflix now, I'm sure it's just a one-off. I don't think they really have him tied in for anything long-term. Conor Diaz 3, that could potentially be something, but I think that turnaround would be way too quick for Diaz, right? May, June, July, 2 months, less than 2 months. And I don't think the UFC would want to market Diaz anymore, considering he's, triple headlining that Netflix card, whatever it is. So I think we've kind of stumbled upon who Conor's opponent could be based on what Masvidal was saying. So yeah, Masvidal could be in the front running or the front runner of who Conor ends up fighting when he comes back to the UFC. I saw Ariel talking a lot about, the discussions he's heard that the UFC and Conor are having. It's looking like Conor will come back in July, long weekend. Again, I don't want to beat that horse even more to the ground or dead, whatever the fucking phrase is. But until we see Conor weigh in, maybe even step foot in the cage, it's still a little bit frustrating to continuously talk about that guy. If they put Conor versus Masvidal, the UFC is going to shove the Austrian KO down our throats in every promo. Well, yeah, for sure, right? Masvidal, I don't think a single knockout has done as much for Masvidal as any other fighter in the world, right? I talked about this a couple weeks ago about Joaquin Buckley. Remember that crazy spinning back kick knockout that he had against Impa Kasanganay? They tried running that, right? They tried running the train on Buckley there to get that hype train going because of that knockout. But then it fizzled out quickly after he got knocked out by Alessio Di Chirico. But Masvidal rode that train as far as he could. Even after losses, he still had some decent fandom, some solid hype, which in the moment I was happy about, right? Masvidal was one of those guys on the regional, or not the regional scene, but like middling UFC card that needed and deserved more respect. The guy was a solid fighter, fun striker, very entertaining fighter. Then he became insufferable after that flying knee knockout. He just, it got too much to his head, in my opinion. But yeah, I'm sure we're going to see that Askren knockout time and time again. All right, I want to touch on the Movsar Evloev and Lerone Murphy decision. Saw a lot of takes on this over the last couple of days. The take, I guess right after the card completed, I was very surprised at the take that seemingly a lot of people had, was that Lerone Murphy got robbed. People saying at best that fight should have been a draw or a Lerone Murphy win. You guys can go back and watch the live stream that I did for the fights. I watched that fight live with you guys. After the first round, I was like, close round. Could go either way, but I'd probably lean Evloev ever so slightly. One, because of cage control, and two, because he was throwing big shots and he was landing them. What Murphy was throwing in return, sure, it was good. He beat Evloev on the numbers in that first round as well, but they weren't impactful shots. They weren't anything that would be like, that would nullify the combination of damage and forward movement that Evloev was being successful with. So I thought that first round could have gone either way. In the moment, I leaned with Evloev. There was a fight, 2 fights before, MVP versus Sam Patterson, round 1 specifically, where there wasn't a whole lot going on. There wasn't a lot of damage to score. And it kind of reminded me of that Evloev and Murphy round 1. And I even said it after the round 1. I said, this reminds me of the first round of MVP versus Patterson. And they scored that round for Patterson, or for MVP, because MVP was moving forward and threatening with more shots than what Patterson was doing in return. And the combination of the forward movement and the strikes outdoes whatever Patterson was doing off of his back foot. Similar thinking to what I had in the Evloev fight. So as round 2 started, you see the media scores come up. You see, I think they sold 2 or 3 tweets or threads, whatever you want to call it, of people giving that first round to Murphy. I thought I was insane. I'm like, what? Wait a second, what? No way. Like not even one scorecard for Evloev, which I was very surprised by. Round 2, easy Lerone Murphy, right? I think round 2, 4, and 5 are the easiest rounds to score. Round 2, Murphy. Round 4, 5, Evloev. Round 3 is the other one that's up for debate. Now, that's a round that was very close, similar to the first round. Evloev didn't nearly go to his grappling as much as he should have, as he did in the 4th and 5th round. But I think the most significant thing that happened in that round, let alone in the entire fight, was the big barrage of shots that Evloev landed in the dying seconds of that round that opened the cut on Murphy. He landed bigger shots than Murphy had landed in the entire fight in that little section of time. And I think that was enough to warrant Evloev getting that 3rd round. So I can understand the possibility of 47-47. If you scored round 1 for Murphy, I'm not completely blaming you. But it was a much closer round than people were making it out to be. It was very, very close. So I personally had it, and I was questioning myself as we got into deeper water, because I could hear the commentary in my head or in my earbud as I was watching the fight, and they just made it sound like Murphy had won. But I was still questioning it because of how I thought the first round went. And I thought for sure 4 and 5 was Evloev. I thought maybe we would get a draw. But when it's all said and done, 47-47 or 48-46 for Evloev, I think was the right score. I don't think you could give Murphy more than rounds 1 and 2. I thought you give Murphy 2 rounds at best. Round 3, again, very close. But how can you not score the most significant thing that happened in that fight enough in favor for Evloev to get that round? So I think the rightful person won. Obviously, I'm an Evloev fan, trying to keep the bias out of it still. But even upon rewatching that first round, I thought it was close enough. And then as the days started to pass, you started to see more takes on it and more people justifying why Evloev deserved to win that decision. And I agree with a lot of them, right? I heard one of the narratives was, just because Evloev didn't wrestle doesn't mean he automatically lost the round. I can see how that's a large part of the thinking for a lot of people. Because you just assume if the fight plays in the striking room, Murphy would be up. But I thought Evloev did great. Come on. And we're back. I don't know what happened right there, but we're good. And yeah, the commentary, they're making it sound like Murphy was 100% sure up those first 3 rounds. They're even saying that Evloev needs a finish or something like that in rounds 4 and 5. I wasn't seeing it. I think commentary definitely had a lot to do with it as well. Excuse me. Don't tell me I'm getting the hiccups. Well, it's still about 25 minutes left in this stream. But yeah, that's my thoughts. I thought Evloev deserved to win. I think if you guys go back and watch the first round specifically without the commentary, I think you guys would see it the same way as well. Matthew's saying, I thought it was a pretty clear 47-47. I don't see how judges scored it 4-1 without being on drugs. I'd have to rewatch it live. I thought Murphy won rounds 1 and 2. Definitely go back watch round 1. I think that's the one that's kind of confusing the most. Round 3, I think it's easy to justify for Evloev, even though some people thought it was for Murphy. That last exchange, I think, was enough for Evloev to win it in a very tight round. But round 1, watch that back. Again, the lack of damage that Murphy landed, even though he was up on numbers, against the forward pressure. Again, octagon control is a part of the criteria. And then all the big shots that Evloev was throwing and landing, from the overhands to the body kicks, that needs to be taken into consideration. So, yeah, I don't think Murphy did enough off of his back foot. I'm more than willing to discredit octagon control if the retreating opponent or retreating fighter is landing legitimately effective damage. I don't think we saw any of that. I think that was also the round where we saw that teep that pushed Murphy all the way back, right? That's a significant-ish strike to have landed. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Evloev and Murphy fight. One thing I also like to do on this stream is just look at odds for UFC, whatever UFC event is coming up. Obviously, I study a lot of these fights either late in the week before or over the weekend and into Monday. So during that time, lines obviously have the opportunity to move. Obviously, not as much as they do when I do the Fight Day live chat on Saturdays. So let's check it out. Bahamundes still sitting around minus 300. Chase Hooper taking some action now, going from minus 240 to minus 270. Tyrell Fortune slowly taking money, going from minus 120 to minus 135. Casey O'Neill taking action as well. I think I saw her about plus 110. Now she's sitting at plus 100. Navajo Sterling, as you would expect, taking some action, going from 600 to 650. The Ricky Simone and Adrian Yanez fight staying roughly around that minus 145 range. Thinara Love keeping her at minus 700. Adesanya sticking around minus 130. That's where it seems like he's going to settle out for this card. Barber was constantly taking money over the last couple of days. She's up to minus 185 now. Again, that one a little bit surprising to me. I don't know if it's just a public sentiment on Alexa Grasso. Obviously, she hasn't been doing all that great in her recent fights, but it's all about styles, right? We know Shevchenko was a bad stylistic matchup for her. Natalia Silva is a frustrating stylistic matchup for almost anybody she goes up against. Macy Barber, she already has a win over her. This could be an opportunity for her to remind people that she deserved to get to a title and win the title. This is one of those matchups where she could have success. Lehian Douglas, I think they go by. He's gone from about minus 270 to minus 300. Yusri Belgraoui taking some steady action now. He's gone from about plus 110 to minus 105. And then Terrence McKinney is kind of set around minus 170. The line that's a little bit surprising to me that has not widened is the under 1.5. I saw it at minus 285 a few days ago. Now it's sitting at minus 250 in that Terrence McKinney fight. How? How is that not more chalked? Let me just spit some facts for you guys here for Terrence McKinney and why I always love the under 1.5 in his fights, no matter what the chalk is. Let me get my my stats here real quick. Take this in. 21 of his 25 fights have finished in round 1. 24 of those 25 fights have finished under 1.5 rounds. 24 of 25 fights. All 12 of his UFC fights have finished under 1.5 rounds, with only 2 of them reaching round 2, yet still finishing under 1.5 rounds. It doesn't matter who he goes up against. The under 1.5 more than likely always hits. Not more than likely. It's guaranteed to hit in the UFC, right? It always hits when he's fighting in the UFC. No matter who he's fighting. No matter if he's fighting guys that go the distance more often than not. His style never changes. And it looks like he's never going to change that style because the UFC always gives him guys that he's able to go out there and just land big shots against and eventually get them out of there. Or he gasses out quickly and gets finished himself. I think it's going to be him getting the finish over Kyle Nelson, but Nelson could definitely get him out of there as well. So that's obviously the spot that I like the most. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And yeah, I did skip over Chiesa here. He was about minus 525 when I studied this. Now he's minus 600. I'm not saying Chiesa will lose, but minus 650 money line is insane. Probably a lot to do with Nico Price's low lights. Yeah, that. But also, this is Chiesa's retirement fight, right? This is a matchup for him to go out there and show out in front of his home state and then ride off into the sunset with a big win. I thought his original matchup with Carlston Harris was a bad one for him. So luckily for him, Harris not making the date anymore, and in steps Nico Price, who has been out-grappled by lesser grapplers, who has had a very murky chin in recent fights, getting knocked out by Nikolai Veretennikov just a month and a half ago. How he got cleared for this, I don't know. But regardless, Michael Chiesa getting a very, very favorable matchup for this weekend's card. And I think that chalk is going to be worth it. I'm usually very skeptical about paying chalk on fighters. I always try to give the other fighter the benefit of the doubt and find ways to not be on chalk of that level. But it really depends what the stylistic match is, right? Like this week, there's a few heavy favorites that I feel like will more than likely win. I'd love to parlay them all together, but you're still only getting like minus 200 on that parlay, right? I think Navajo Sterling knocks Bruno Lopez the hell out within a round and a half. I think Alexia Thainara runs through Bruno Brazil and gets her revenge in their rematch. And I think Michael Chiesa twists Nico Price up into a knot and gets the submission. But like parlaying all three of those guys together, let's see what number you can currently get on Bet Online for that parlay. Sterling minus 650, Thainara minus 700, Chiesa minus 600. Oh, great. BetOnline is not allowing the Chiesa parlay yet because that fight is somewhat new. So let's see on Pinnacle. Sterling minus 563. Oh, they don't even have the Michael Chiesa matchup here yet. All right, let's go to Ozun, formerly known as Bodog. Oh, already got it up here. Minus 600 Chiesa, minus 650 Sterling, minus 750 Thainara. Put those three together, you get a whopping minus 189. So, tough to justify that parlay. Obviously, we got some other mixed martial arts cards going down this weekend. We got LFA 229. There's a lot of MMA going down this weekend, actually. A1 Combat, ACA 201. These are just the ones that BetOnline currently has odds for. A1 Combat, ACA 201, LFA 229, PFL Pittsburgh, UAE Warriors 68 and 69. 69 doesn't have their odds up yet, but I know they have a doubleheader this weekend. And Unified 68. Also, just a quick shameless plug here for the MMA Fight Archive. Might as well bring that up for you guys here. Where is it? I just finished. It took me a fuck ton of time because there is a lot of new fighters fighting this weekend for those promotions. So I was able to finally catch up with it this weekend. Let me just get it up on the screen here. Where the fuck? There we go. MMA Fight Archive, your one-stop shop for all your researching needs. We got one Friday, 148. We got ACA 201, UAE Warriors 68, Unified MMA 68 as well. Uriah Faber's A1 Combat 34, CFFC 152, LFA 229, UAE Warriors 69, PFL Pittsburgh, UFC Seattle, and then on Sunday we got Anthony Pettis FC 23. Still a few fighters that I haven't added as of yet, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that Tapology and Sherdog are showing two different cards. I don't know which fighters are actually competing on this card, but once I get some clarity on that, I will be able to update that for whoever wants to study up on that card. But again, if you like to study up on MMA, the MMA Fight Archive, absolutely amazing. Obviously, I created it, I maintain it, but I use it myself whenever I'm studying as well, right? You want fights on Janilto Matos? We got you covered. All the direct links to his fights right there. You also got direct links to his Tapology, Sherdog, Instagram. He has no Twitter. He has no UFC stats page. He has no MMA decisions, but he has a best fight odds page as well. Got you completely covered on the MMA Fight Archive. I used to plug that for all of my Lock-Cast episodes. I haven't been doing it recently because I know people just... I myself, I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts. I don't really listen to MMA podcasts. And nothing I hate more than ads and commercials and stuff. So I've started to refrain from plug in the archive as much as I used to, but definitely something I should do, especially on the Fight Day live chat. Fight Day live chat is popping, right? That's when we usually get most of our viewers in here and watching the stream as well, as hours before the card kicks off. Speaking of which, I think we have an early card this year or this weekend. Not as early as UFC London, obviously, but let me see here. Yeah, early prelims for UFC Seattle, 5 p.m. Eastern. So I'll still be sticking with my usual 1 p.m. Eastern Fight Day live chat. And then I will be doing a live stream for the fights as well. Again, I promised you guys 2 fight cards a month. We did one last weekend. We're going to do one this coming weekend. And then I'll start to map out how I want to do April. Obviously, I want to cover pay-per-view cards. So I'll for sure be doing that big UFC 327, I believe it is. Prohaska versus Ulberg. Amazing main event. Not to mention the co-main with the flyweight title, Joshua Van versus Tatsuro Taira. That's a fun fight. So yeah, a lot to cover coming up. Honestly, I could use a fucking break. I got so much goddamn work to do still. Like, I haven't started studying up on PFL yet. I should do that, especially if I want to release the podcast for you guys on Thursday. LFA, I think, has like 13 or 14 fights as well. I should be doing a podcast for that on Thursday as well. I just got a shit ton of archive stuff to do. The few things that have kind of been fucking me up over the last couple of days, adding all the new fighter profiles for this week's card. There's just so many new fighters that I haven't had on the or who have not competed on promotions that I cover since 2023. So I've had to add them this week. Also, there was some sort of geo-blocking issue from July 2025 to the end of the year for people not being able to watch individual Fight Pass fights on Fight Pass, at least for people in the US. So I was able to figure out, going to just the event video and pulling up the fights that way and timestamping the event video. I had to do that from all the events from July to December. So I've been working through that. I still got November and December to get through, which I'm going to do after the stream here. Then we got, just my usual run through of what I do for the archive. I double check all the fight links to make sure they're all still working for the upcoming week of fights. Then I go through every single promotion that I cover. I go through their YouTube page and see if they've uploaded any free fights on there, and then I sub out those links as well. What else? Then I do a full scan of the archive, every single event that's currently announced for all 20 plus promotions that I cover, making sure all that's accurate. So there's a lot to do. I don't just study up and break down fights and create this content for you guys. A lot of my work actually goes towards the archive. Because I know, I think we have 115 members right now. So if that's something that you're looking to get into, make sure you guys check it out. I used to do free trials, but I was starting to get this feeling that there were a lot of people that would just use the trial, cancel, and then sign up with a different email and username and stuff and do it. I was getting a lot of people that, or at least, people canceling right after the trial and then just, somebody with a new username signing up right away for another trial. So I got rid of the trials because I really think if you do studying and predicting and analyzing yourself, this service saves you a boatload of time. So I don't think it's even worth putting the trials out there anymore. And luckily, we've been able to get a lot of subscribers and stuff for that too. But it is a lot of work. I'd say that is what the majority of my work and time goes to. So whenever there's a weekend where there's only, 1 or 2 events, I am beyond thankful. This week we got at least 1 or 2 events in terms of the ones that I cover. This week I got 3 events that I'm covering: LFA 229, PFL Pittsburgh, UFC Seattle. Next week, praise the Lord, only 2 events. We got LFA 230 and UFC Vegas 115. So I know I'll have a lot of time that week to either do archive stuff or just take an entire day off and chill the fuck out. I try to make Sundays that day. I try to make Sundays just like a family kind of day, just completely remove myself from mixed martial arts and any type of work. But this past week, I had to. I had to do archive stuff. I had to do studying up, so I was ready to shoot my podcast on Monday. But I'm hoping this coming Sunday, I won't have those stresses. I could just completely fuck off for the entire day. Because then after that, we got April 10th weekend. We got 4 events: PFL Africa, Cage Warriors 204, PFL Chicago, and UFC 327. Week after that, 3 events. Week after that, 2 events. But again, this schedule is going to start to fill up as we get further and further in, and more of these regional promotions start announcing their fights. All right, I got just over 5 minutes left with you guys here. So if you have any more questions, comments, or concerns, please drop it in the comment section so we can talk about it. Ayman Saeed saying, do you have 3 finishes this UFC fight night? I'm assuming you're saying, do you think at least 3 fights finish on this UFC fight night? Sorry, let me pull up the card. I think Pfeiffer and Adesanya finishes. I think Chiesa and Price finishes. I think Arosa and Douglas finishes. I think McKinney and Nelson finishes. Bahamondes and Musayev finishes. I think Hooper finishes Gibson. I think Sterling finishes Lopez. I think Yanez finishes Simone. So there's at least 8 there out of the 13. So hopefully that answers your questions. Or that question specifically. Douglas, Navo, and Fortune. Yeah, Fortune could maybe get the finish. I'm thinking we're going to see more of a grapple-heavy approach from him. I think we're going to see him try to subdue Marcin off of his back. Fortune not a big knockout puncher or anything like that, but I think there's at least 8 fights that finish. And again, gun to my head. Fights that I think actually finish. Sterling, Lopez, Bahamondes, Musayev, McKinney, Nelson, Arosa, Douglas, Chiesa, Price, and then the main event, Adesanya and Pfeiffer. So at least 6 that I for sure think finish. The other 2 that I mentioned, I think if Hooper wins, he probably gets the submission. But if Gibson wins, that probably comes by decision. And then what was the other one that I mentioned? Oh, Simone and Yanez. If Yanez wins, I think he gets the knockout. If Simone wins, I think it's him grinding Yanez out. So, whereas the other matchups that I said, I think no matter who wins, they probably win by finish, right? Adesanya probably picks apart and knocks out an exhausted Pfeiffer in deep water if he wins. Price, maybe his knockout power comes through and he knocks out Michael Chiesa. Same with Julian Erosa. He has an awkward striking style, a nasty front guillotine. He could probably get a finish too. I think McKinney finishes Nelson, but Nelson is more than capable of finishing McKinney, especially with how McKinney normally fights. I think Bahamondes finishes Musayev, but Musayev also has crazy knockout power that he could get the finish. And then Sterling Lopez, I think Lopez is just too irresponsible striking-wise, and I think that just gets him finishes outright. Sterling doesn't finish people. I could see why you think that. He has 4 KOs, 4 KOs, 4 decisions. 3 of those decisions coming in the UFC. So he hasn't actually finished anybody in the UFC. You are correct. But I believe he has a big enough striking advantage here over Lopez that he can actually produce that finish. Bellator's a weird, grindy fighter, right? Same with Arslan. The Tokos one, I will admit, I am a little bit surprised that Sterling did not get the finish that night. I believe he hurt him a few times, but then didn't really exhaust himself. But I think considering how bad Bruno Lopez's striking defense normally is, I think that we'll see Sterling actually get the finish there. And historically speaking, you know what? I was going to say that Jacoby's not really a big finisher. He was able to finish Julius Walker. Julius Walker's just, I don't think he's UFC level. Vitor Petrino, he caught him as Petrino was super tired and slow in that 3rd round. Kenny Nzechukwu, that one was a little bit surprising that he got the win so quickly. Dao Eun-Jung, a little bit surprising in that one. But yeah, he is getting finishes. I can see where you're coming from with that comment. But I really think that that Sterling will catch Lopez slipping here. And this is also one of those fights where I don't think Sterling would benefit from taking Lopez to the ground. I think Lopez is a much better grappler and could even have success off of his own back. So hopefully Sterling has that in the back of his head and knows that my best way to beat this guy is with punches and just trying to find that big shot. And I think he'll be able to do it here. I think it's more so Lopez and his poor striking defense that will lead to him getting finished here. You know, getting finished by Brenjison Hibero, getting finished by Dustin Jacoby, not really a great look. And those are both of his losses, right? Both of his losses are round one knockouts. The other guys the guys that he beat between his Hibero and Jacoby losses, Marcos Bragagiao, he was easily able to take him to the ground and eventually submit him in the second round. Mikhail Cezignani, heavy grappler, throws big shots. Excuse me. Not a great striker, hence why Lopez was able to outstrike and eventually finish him. Magomed Gadzhiesulev, we know that guy doesn't really strike, more of a grappler. That's why Lopez was able to get the better of him because he was able to stop the grappling there. He doesn't have a better striking game than Sterling. So we'll see how committed Sterling is to getting a finish. And here's another aspect of it. I think Sterling should be motivated by this matchup, mainly because motivated to get a finish, mainly because he is 3-0 in the UFC now. Light heavyweight we know is quite thin, right? Outside of those top guys, Prohaska, Khalil, Jamal Hill, Pereira's obviously up at heavyweight now. Alberg, his teammate. There's not much to the light heavyweight division. Yet, even with Sterling on a 3-fight winning streak, they're plugging him into what? He's the third fight of the night. He is a streaking 205er that has the ability to go out there and make entertaining fights and produce entertaining knockouts. So I feel like he's got to know that this is a spot where he should feel disrespected for being so low on the card to begin with. And two, be like, hey, I can go knock this guy out and then actually get back onto a main card and get that hype behind me again that a lot of people saw from me when I got off the Contender series. So a lot of things going into that. Maybe I'm reading into the narrative a little bit too much there, but I feel like this is a spot where he should really go for it. All right. Appreciate the love as always. Tomorrow, quick picks for UFC Seattle. Thursday, we're doing best bets, which you guys can fade all you want. Obviously, I haven't been doing that great this year, but I still got to release that segment for you guys. I will more than likely also be releasing both my breakdowns for PFL Pittsburgh and LFA on that Thursday, so stay tuned for that. Friday, UFC weigh-in recap. Saturday, Fight Day live chat, usually 1 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you guys tune in for that. And then also, we will be doing a live watch party on Saturday as well for the card. I'll take this last question here from Matthew and then get out of here. What does Izzy's career look like if he loses this fight? I don't see the UFC cutting him. I think he probably takes another long time off. I think he'll eventually come back to the UFC. I think he'll eventually have another fight, maybe two, but they'll probably match him up accordingly, right? Guys that are on the decline, maybe prospects that haven't really made a name for themselves that he could probably easily beat, maybe guys that don't have crazy knockout power. There are still fights out there that you could give him. Maybe he goes back up to light heavyweight. He's like, fuck it, I don't want to cut the weight anymore. Give me some easy matchups at light heavyweight. So it will be very weird. I had the same thought when he was going up against Nasruddin Imavov. Leading up to that fight, I'm like, if he loses this fight, what is there left for him to do? And it seems like they have plugged him in with another rising prospect. So, yeah, maybe no more rising prospects. That would be on the menu for Izzy if he ends up losing this weekend. All right. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys. I will catch you guys again later on in the week.